Hello and welcome to the Sidebar, presented by True Crime News, taking you inside the courtrooms of high-profile and notorious cases from across the country. I'm your host, Joshua Ritter. I'm a criminal defense lawyer based in Los Angeles and previously an LA County prosecutor for nearly a decade. You can find me on all social applications at Joshua Ritter ESQ or at joshuaritter.com. We are recording this on Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. In this week's episode, bombshell testimony in Karen Reed's retrial as attention is turned to the defense case. Plus, terrifying allegations of abuse suffered at the hands of Sean Diddy Combs in the mogul's federal sex trafficking trial. But first, we open with a man facing murder charges for allegedly killing and dismembering a woman after their first date. Today, we are joined by Adanté Pointer, an attorney, civil rights activist, and legal analyst you can catch on multiple outlets. Adanté, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's always good to show up to the show.
Yeah, it's always good to speak with you. I'm a big fan. I follow a lot of the commentary that you do, and I know that you're also a very busy working attorney, so I appreciate you finding the time to speak with us. Let's go ahead and just jump right in then, if we can, out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where a 34-year-old man is facing trial for allegedly killing and dismembering a woman after their first date. Maxwell Anderson stands accused of first-degree murder, mutilating a corpse, and arson in the death of Sade Robinson. Robinson, who was 19 at the time of her death, was reported missing after she failed to show up for work, and the discovery of her burnt-out car led to a prolonged search for her remains, which were spread out across multiple locations. Anderson and Robinson allegedly went on a date in April of 2024, where the pair enjoyed dinner and drinks despite Robinson's age, before the woman's car was seen driving around and eventually burned with gasoline. Prosecutors claim surveillance cameras and eyewitnesses saw Anderson burning the vehicle, and a police search of the man's home allegedly revealed bloodstains and several gasoline containers. No motive is known for Robinson's slaying, and prosecutors allege Anderson killed and dismembered the teen for, quote, absolutely no reason. Anderson maintains his innocence and the trial is ongoing, but we will continue to update you as this progresses. Adanté, the first thing I wanted to turn to is we've talked about this many times before, that the prosecution does not have to provide a motive in a murder case. They have to show intent, they have to show criminal intent, but they don't have to show motive. In other words, what was the reason why somebody did something? What was going on between their two ears? But what do you make of this idea of actually saying to the jury that the reason for this is absolutely no reason at all? Do you think that could perhaps present some problems for the jury?
I think typically when you think about a prosecutor not having a motive or producing one during trial, that certainly can be problematic in terms of the jury's analysis as to why this person engaged in the conduct. However, here, given the gruesome nature of the crime, it almost just resonates with pure evil. And so even if you don't have a motive saying, hey, they had an argument or something like that, it's just evil. He engaged in evil activities, behavior and conduct, and was just an evil person. Is almost, by saying there was no motive, is almost saying that it's just pure evil. And so I think that's what they're aiming for in terms of what the jury will fill in that blank as to a motive. Just guy's evil. He had no good reason.
Yeah, and listen, it does exist. There are people who are just purely evil and out of nowhere decide that they're going to do something horrific and awful. It's just, you would think in a case like this, having something for the jurors to wrap their heads around might be helpful. I'll add to that question and why I feel like this may be an issue or maybe not. He apparently had no history of violence. And now you're talking about a person committing, like you said, an act of pure evil, killing someone, dismembering them, burning their car, disposing of their body at different locations. And this is just an anomaly in this person's life. Doesn't it seem like that might be something that jurors would begin to struggle with? Just why in the world would somebody like this do this?
I certainly could see jurors struggling with it and trying to search for something in this man's background, be it past criminal conduct, which it doesn't sound like there's any, and that being a barrier that they have to overcome in order to believe that he did what he's accused of. However, in this situation where they have allegedly the evidence of him, driving the car, burning it up, and being seen with her and things like that. They found the gas cans, which is I understand, at his house, and there's blood stains. Then it lends itself to believe that he had something to do with at least killing her and burning up her car. So if you have that, I think that actually compensates for the lack of motive and the lack of a history of violence. Although, just because they don't know that he was violent doesn't mean he has not been violent on other occasions and perhaps
very true.
Got away with it.
Very, very true. You're right. Just because there isn't a history that we know of does not mean that this is the first time he's done something like this. It just might be the first time he got caught. One last point on this, and I don't mean to, by asking these questions, diminish the prosecution's case. As you've pointed out a couple of times already, they do have evidence, and it looks like they have pretty overwhelming evidence. But there are some interesting kind of questions and weaknesses with the prosecution's case. Another one of those is that the medical examiner was unable to determine the means of death. In other words, it's classified as a homicide, but they don't know how exactly she was killed, in part because her body was dismembered, the burning of the vehicle. There's a lot of questions still as to how she actually met her gruesome end. Do you think that will present problems for the jury? So now they've got no explanation, no motive, no criminal history that they know of, and now kind of unknown means of murder. Are these significant enough, or do you think still the prosecution's got this case?
There are significant challenges for the prosecution. And from what we have understand, they're going to put that up front and center with the jury proceeding into this trial so that it's not something that the jury is left for themselves to wonder, well, why didn't they do this and why didn't they do that? I imagine the prosecutor say, we don't have the evidence proving these different things. However, the way in which she was dismembered is an easy reach and not a bridge too far for a jury to understand. If the young lady actually was still in one piece, we might be able to figure out how she died, and that the fact that she was dismembered. So it could also run in the other direction in terms of them looking at the accused saying, you know what, we're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt just because you did things to cover up your crime. You threw rocks, now you're hiding your hands, but we still know and believe that you threw those rocks.
Yeah. Great points. Excellent points. Again, a case that we've been following closely, and we will continue to follow and give you all updates when we finally get a verdict, if we get one in this case. Let's move on to Manhattan, New York, where prosecutors continue to mount their case against Sean Diddy Combs in the mogul's federal sex trafficking trial as a former assistant and hotel security guard take the stand. Combs was charged in the wake of an explosive lawsuit filed by his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, which offered a glimpse into the man's alleged criminal enterprise. Ventura's alleged abuse has been a focal point for prosecutors, with disturbing video that appears to depict Combs beating the woman in a hotel incident, offering some of the most visceral evidence jurors have seen thus far. The CNN leaked video again made the rounds this week in court as the hotel's head of security testified that Combs bribed the man with $100,000 to make the video disappear. While CNN has not revealed their source for the footage, the guard testified under immunity and admitted to signing an agreement with Combs that contained a $1 million breach of contract clause in exchange for the payout. Though Diddy's alleged abuse of Ventura has been a primary focus, another accuser, testifying under the pseudonym Mia, took the stand for days offering similar claims. Mia, who worked for Combs from 2009 to 2017, detailed multiple sexual assaults, threats, and even physical violence allegedly perpetrated by Combs. Under cross-examination, Combs' defense questioned Mia on her continued relationship with the mogul, including texting him on holidays and his birthday, as well as praising him on social media despite his alleged abuse. Mia claimed that she felt brainwashed by Combs and largely regarded the incidents as somehow her fault. Testimony in the case continues as you're listening to this, and we will continue to bring you any developments as they occur. Adanté, let's begin with Mia first. How do you think jurors respond to testimony from alleged victims who maintain their relationships with their abusers? She talked about some horrific things that she suffered at the hands of Sean Combs. Yet, under cross-examination, we see that time and again, she texts him, praises him, wants to be around him, even to the point that when she was terminated from employment, she talks about how it was devastating to her. Do you think that jurors will have a tough time squaring those two things?
I think that jurors will not necessarily wrestle with this credibility issue, but will actually, if you are of the mind state and believe that a person who's been victimized in the way that she is described, repeatedly victimized, can somehow have like a Munchausen syndrome and fall in love with their abuser, then I think you can excuse away and compartmentalize and explain it. It's probably a better word. You can explain why she still continued to praise him and reach out to him and offer all these type of effusive praise of him on social media. However, if you are of the other mind state where you're saying, why would you celebrate someone who did all these horrific things to you? How could you possibly want to maintain a relationship with this person or heap praise upon them and reach out to them on holidays and birthdays after they've done some of the most unspeakable and horrific violative things to you? If you're that juror, this case is going away. If you're the other juror that believes the psychologists that they brought in and the way in which they explain how a victim's mind can work, then you're not going to have a problem and you're going to convict Sean Combs, because you could see him to be a horrendous person, a horrendous boss, a manipulative, greedy guy who took advantage of his celebrity status and his resources to violate people. So I think there's two camps. The question is, which ones are the jurors in? And I honestly believe that most of these people's minds are made up before they were picked on the jury, not necessarily whether he was guilty or not, but how they see victims and what they expect victims to behave like after they've been victimized.
Yeah, interesting thought. It's funny, too, as you point out, the same evidence, depending on which side of this you come out on, you could say that the same evidence proves your point. If you're in that camp that says, well, listen, no reasonable victim would respond this way, then you look at the evidence of her behavior after, during and after this alleged abuse and her text messages to them. And you go, look at that's a person who wasn't suffering from abuse. But if you're in the camp of people who say that's absolutely an indication of abuse, you point to those same text messages and show, look at this pattern of self-blame and returning to the abuser and this cycle of abuse. It's pretty incredible. And maybe you're right. Maybe jurors just already have these kind of built-in biases that they weren't even aware of, but they're already in their heads before they even began this case. How about this video of Cassie? We've all seen it. It was all over the news and the internet. It really was the beginnings of this investigation federally into him. They've shown it quite a few times in court. And I'm curious because I've had cases like this as a prosecutor too, where I have a really strong piece of video evidence. And you have to balance how much do you use that. And to one extent, you want to use it as much as possible because look at how good this is. But then do you think that you might risk desensitizing the jury to it? Do you think that they're perhaps getting into that territory here with this video?
What you raise is something that any trial attorney wrestles with, be it the prosecutor, the defense attorney, or a civil attorney, is how often do you play the video, your best piece of evidence? How often do you trot it out? Because you mentioned you can desensitize the jury to it, and it turns it more into a scientific inquiry versus an emotional one, where you slow it down. You're okay, kicked her 3 times. You're arguing about 3 times versus 5. Was she laying down? Was she doing this? What did he say? And all of a sudden, the shock value goes away or dissipates greatly. So, I think I was reading they're up to 8 or 9 times of playing this video. That's a lot of times. And I think the prosecution, it appears from what I understand, they had gained a lot of momentum early in the case with Cassie and that video. But the more times it's shown and you're talking to other witnesses who have their own credibility issues around still being in love with Diddy after he did all these horrible things that they're testifying about, you start looking at that video and it doesn't look the same, okay? You're wondering, is Cassie same as these other people who, wanted to be in his orbit despite all these bad things that happened? The difference is we have the video for Cassie and nothing for any of these people. But if their credibility is under attack, that could undermine her credibility and the effectiveness of that video, in my opinion.
Yeah. It is funny how that effect really can take place. I'm thinking as you're speaking about a case that I had where I had a hung jury as a prosecutor, had to retry the case. A piece of video played a central role in it. And in the second time I did the trial, I conscientiously did not play it that much. In fact, in opening statements, I only showed stills from the video, and I waited until I felt like it would have the most impact to play it, so that it wasn't this constant kind of thing that they had seen and they became kind of numb to it. And then they're starting to microanalyze each moment in the video. And what does that really show? Whereas you want people to accept it in the heat of that moment. I mean, when you watch that video with Cassie and Sean Combs assaulting her, it is shocking. But if you're starting to break it down second by second, you start to analyze it and you kind of get lost in the trees, as it were, of the overall point of how devastating a video that is. Anyhow, really interesting case that it continues to play out. It looks like it's going to go for a couple of more weeks. We will continue to follow that one as well. Let's finally turn to Dedham, Massachusetts, where defense attorneys for Karen Reed are presenting their case after 23 days of testimony from the state in the Massachusetts woman's retrial for the slaying of her police officer boyfriend. Prosecutors claim that Reed struck John O'Keefe with her SUV in blizzard-like conditions and callously left the man to die in the snow. A key focus in the case is evidence of Reed's broken taillight recovered from the scene, along with testimony from a crash reconstruction expert who opined that there was a high probability that Reed's vehicle struck O'Keefe. However, defense testimony this week offered claims about Reed's taillight, which may raise doubts on the state's evidence. Officer Nicholas Barros took the stand, recalling his response to the home of Reed's parents hours after the distressed woman discovered O'Keefe's body in a snowbank. Barros testified that he received a call from disgraced state trooper Michael Proctor informing the officer that Reed's car would be impounded as part of the homicide investigation. Before police impounded the car, Barros allegedly spent a significant amount of time around the vehicle, noting that Reed's rear taillight was cracked with a piece missing. However, when shown evidence photos of Reed's SUV after it was taken into police custody, Barros testified that the taillight had been completely smashed out. This could discredit prosecutors' theory that scrapes found on O'Keefe's arm were the result of a collision. How jurors regard this information remains to be seen, but we will follow this case closely as the defense continues to present their side of the case. Keeping in mind that this jury ostensibly knows nothing about the first trial. And I think that's difficult because the first trial was so high profile. This trial is so high profile that many of us watching it for the second time are kind of joining the two in our heads, I feel like. But this jury, hopefully, doesn't know anything about the first trial. What do you think they make of this evidence? Do you think that they hear from this officer Barros, who says that taillight was not the way that I see it in this picture here is not the way that I saw it when I first arrived to the location where it was impounded from? Do you think that they're connecting the dots on a conspiracy here, or do you think they might be saying to themselves, I'm just a little confused as to what I'm hearing?
Well, these are all concerns on both sides of the aisle when you've already tried the case once and now you're doing it a second time, in terms of making sure that you hit the high points and that it resonates with the jury. And so you can get lost. A jury can get lost in the minutia. It's difficult for them to follow the bouncing ball, if you will, depending upon how the evidence comes in and how it's framed. And frankly, when I looked at the opening statements in this case, the defense was a little hamstrung because the judge had ruled that they could not say and identify these people we think killed him and it's not our client. And so what I could see happening here is without that opening statement, and we know as attorneys that's the jury's roadmap, it might be a little bit more difficult for them to figure out how all of this fits together. At the same time, a famous lawyer once said, if it doesn't fit, you have to acquit. And now we have a situation where the taillight is gone and something's wrong. So we'll see how the jury takes it. But I think it goes it's a very powerful piece of evidence for the defense to show that the fix is in and that their client didn't do what she's accused of doing.
On this same note, with this officer, just in general, maybe not this officer so much, but in general, what impact do you think it has for the defense to be calling police officers in their case? So they called this cop, not called by the Commonwealth. This wasn't under cross-examination. They called this cop themselves to testify to these things. Do you think that jurors might take a look at that and go, wow, why am I hearing from police officers when it comes to the defense case?
I think that's a big misstep by the prosecution, because a jury could sit there and say, you know what, this is a police officer. You were investigating this. Ostensibly, I believe you told somebody because the defense found out about it. And the prosecution, were they trying to hide you from us? Were they afraid of your testimony? And so if a juror starts getting that in their mind, they lose, the prosecutors loses credibility and steam in their case. And the defense, on the other hand, start looking like the good guys because it's a credibility contest. You want to frame yourself as the attorney and your side as being the truth tellers. We're not afraid of the truth, and we're going to bring it out to you. We're going to let you know everything you need to know so you make the right decision. As soon as a doubt creeps in a juror's mind as to your credibility and whether or not you're a truth teller or you're a slick oil can salesman, you're done.
Yeah. One last question on this case. It's very different from the first trial in many ways, but one way that sticks out is how quickly the prosecution put on their case. They've put on about half as many witnesses as was put on during the first case. Do you think that was a smart strategy, or do you think they may have gone through their case too quickly?
Well, I think tightening up your case, putting on witnesses that actually move the needle, eliminating repetitive testimony, eliminating witnesses who might be so into details that the jury really doesn't need, and the fact that you've already tried the case once, you have an ability to you have a focus group. You've already had a mock trial. So I could see them shortening the case because they're saying, let's get rid of the fluff. Let's get rid of the things that are confusing. Let's get rid of the things that really don't move the needle. The flip side is less people on the stand, less people that the defense have to work and attack. And so the defense now might take an inordinate amount of time in order to defend their case, which if the time, in terms of the time of witnesses on the stand, is somewhat even, I think that also goes to the defense benefit because they're saying, hey, we actually have a defense and we're calling witnesses. We have just as many witnesses as the prosecution. And, jury, this case is not as much of a slam dunk as the prosecution led you to believe. And this is why. And put out all those witnesses. And I think it really gives steam to the defense. And I think the defense, so far from what I've seen, is doing a very good job at bringing that out.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Adanté, I always love hearing from you. I'm so grateful that you could come on this week. You're an absolute gentleman, not to mention a very sharp dresser. Where can people find out more about you? Well, apparently they can go to your closet and look at your wardrobe and figure mine out too. But if they want to find out more than my wardrobe or even check out the wardrobe, in my opinions, they can find me under my name, Adanté, Adante Pointer, Pointer, and Adanté Pointer, ESQ. I'm everywhere, Googleable. There's not another one like me, and there's certainly not another one like you. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I'm your host, Josh Ritter. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Joshua Ritter ESQ or at joshuaritter.com. And if you want to hear my thoughts and coverage on even more true crime cases, please check out my brand new YouTube channel, Courtroom Confidential. And you can, of course, find all of our Sidebar episodes wherever you get your podcasts. And we would love to hear from you. If you've got questions or comments you would like us to address, please tweet us your questions with the hashtag TCN Sidebar. And thank you again for joining us at the True Crime News Sidebar.